In the following presentation is a scheme of work designed to give fifth-year students in a post-primary school a positive experience of art history. The task set out for this art history assignment was to design, deliver, assess and evaluate a discrete scheme of lessons dealing with an area of the history and appreciation of art curriculum. The scheme consisting of 4 lessons which deal with a theme, including 1 assessment method per lesson, with an evaluation of the scheme, and finally including evidence of learning through visual materials, worksheets, tests, etc. Firstly, I will present my rationale for this scheme. This scheme of work has been designed to give fifth-year students in a post-primary school a positive experience of art history. The area of art history covered will be Impressionism, understanding styles, the practitioners, and their work from this period. To provide key elements for organising and supporting student learning, and my intention of these studies is to provide general knowledge and intellectual skills. The aims of this art history scheme is to provide a space for students to appreciate and learn the history of art, to aid students in understanding Impressionism, to use learning tools such as handouts, crosswords, DVD footage and visual aids as a working process for conceiving the history of art, in particular Impressionism. The scheme aims to examine conceptual and making practices of artists who worked in the Impressionist movement, in particular Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir and Edgar Degas. Looking at these artists' work, analysing the philosophical and expressive meanings in their work while acquiring knowledge and understanding of artists' activity in the past. Through this investigation of artwork, the aim of the scheme is to develop the student's ability to think independently, develop an interest and enthusiasm for the history and appreciation of art, and understand the contemporary world through the study of the past. Now to look at the learning outcomes of this scheme. Students should be able to demonstrate an understanding of the history of Impressionist styles, the practitioners and their works. The students should be able to express and communicate knowledge and understanding, demonstrate knowledge and understand terms, concepts and issues, and the significance of techniques and materials in the creation of artefacts. Students must be able to analyse and interpret the works effectively to be able to make independent and critical judgments of artists' work and visual problems. Below is a list of resources used for this art history scheme. I acquired images and information from CD-ROMs, DVDs, websites, books and journals. I developed dedicated study notes of major terms and concepts in history of art, in particular Impressionism. In analysing artwork, I placed an order within an approach to pictorial analysis. Through this process, I looked at imagery in this order: Impressionism, Monet, Renoir and then Degas. Using the school laptop, projector and screen to use slide presentation programs such as PowerPoint, and also to use the DVD. I also used a DVD on Impressionism with Tim Marlowe. Now to look at teaching and learning strategies. Teaching and learning activities will ideally include first-hand experience of artworks directly relating to the chosen sections of subject content gained through studio, collection, gallery, museum and/or site visits. I myself have been to see various artworks in museums in the past, and I will show students postcards, calendars and photos of these visits. Students can also benefit from first-hand experience of artworks indirectly relating to the studied sections. With or without this kind of first-hand experience, teaching and learning activities should include teacher-directed, class-based and/or independent study of the following: slide presentation of artworks using a presentation program such as PowerPoint, books, journals and other printed-based media, recorded art, historical, television, video, CD-ROM, DVD programs online with resources such as tate.org.uk is a useful website. Knowledge and understanding and communication skills should be progressively acquired and developed through teacher-led presentation on the selected styles, periods, movement, practitioners and works. And then to finally have a class discussion on the specified topic. Now to look at the scheme itself. The scheme was to cover Impressionism. Just to give a brief synopsis of Impressionism before we begin to look at the lesson, I will begin by telling you briefly about Impressionism. In April 1874, following the Salons' rejection of their work the previous year, a group of Paris-based painters took the unusual but not unprecedented step of mounting an independent exhibition. They did so in the studios of the photographer Nadar, and one of the group was Claude Monet, and one of his paintings on show was the Impressionist Sunrise. And a journalist, Louis Leroy, with the satirical magazine Le Chevalier, was prompted by this title to name the group Impressionists. Altogether, 8 exhibitions were mounted by the group, and Impressionism went on to replace realism as the dominant avant-garde painting style, and it was concerned with capturing the here and now, but in a looser, less detailed, fixated manner than was the case with realism. It went on to become what is possibly the most widely popular artistic movement of all time. So this leads me on to the actual scheme and the timeline of the scheme and the lessons. The scheme consisted of 4 weeks, one single class with 35 minutes per week. Week 1 was 35 minutes. This was to introduce Impressionism through a PowerPoint presentation by presenting images, with visual aids laminated to hang on display in the classroom. Hand out dedicated study notes I designed myself on Impressionism to accompany their own art book within the school. Either teacher reads out aloud to class or students read out various paragraphs to encourage student participation. And at the end of the class, an Impressionist test on the subject matter within this dedicated study notes that we have already read in the lesson. So, Lesson 1. Introduction to Impressionism. Developing dedicated study notes for students with 2 handouts introducing Impressionism. Here is an example of the study notes I designed to aid students' learning and to accompany their own school art book. This first handout looks at the art of Impressionism, how it differs from that of the academic art, using visual artwork of academic art and comparing it to that of Claude Monet's Impression Sunrise. The page is divided up into 2 sections. On the left covers the area of academic art, as you can see here. What the artists were preoccupied with, its styles and the salon. On the right are main points about the Impressionist movement. What their subject matter was, how the artists applied paint in splashing brushstrokes, and how colours were not mixed on the palette. This is optical mixing, where colours are applied side by side and mixed with the eye. This section also discusses Salon de Refusé. The second set of notes, designed for students for the first lesson, looked at what influenced the Impressionists, looking at the invention of photography and its unexpected angle and how this influenced the group of artists. Also, Japanese prints influenced the Impressionists, their crop compositions and the lack of preoccupation with perspective. These notes highlighted key points that influenced the Impressionists, which leads the students into a brief outline of Claude Monet and the work of the Impression Sunrise. To give a brief outline on Claude Monet, of all the painters, Monet remained the most consistently Impressionist throughout his working life. He was introduced to painting by Eugene Bruton, from whom he acquired the lifelong conviction that landscape painting had to be done outdoors and in front of the motif itself. His determination to capture a scene as accurately as possible led to the practice of working for only 1 or 2 hours on any given canvas. After that, he considered the light would have changed so much that a different painting was called for. At the end of this lesson was an Impressionist test, having spent 20 minutes of the class getting the students to read out each paragraph of the dedicated notes and discussing the imagery on PowerPoint, looking at the distinct opposite styles of academic and Impressionist art. Turning their notes over, I gave students 10 minutes to complete this test, which was handed out. Each student completed the test individually. Prior to beginning the test, I read through each question with the students so students understood the language of the questions. And they could get a chance to ask questions related to the test. The test consisted of 8 questions. I had previously set out a marking scheme for the test with 100 marks in total, giving 5 marks for each correct answer. I found this method very useful in testing what students had learnt in the class. Here is an example of some of the students' work. In hindsight, I would give more room on the page for students to answer the questions, as they had to divide up the page for their own answers. Lesson 2, Week 2, 35 minutes. Introduce the practitioner within the Impressionist movement, Auguste Renoir, and the works he produced, with a PowerPoint presentation of slides of his work. Hand out mind map notes. These are the dedicated notes I designed. On Renoir, either a teacher reads out aloud in class or students participate in reading out sections of the reading. In groups of 4, complete a crossword on the subject matter covered within the class for approximately 10 minutes. Lesson 2, focusing on the Impressionist artist Auguste Renoir. Viewing 2 of Renoir's most prominent pieces of artwork, looking at Moulin de Galette, a typical painting celebrating people with its open composition, a snapshot of a friendly setting. This painting is not formally composed, representing a spontaneous moment in time. Discussing these works of art on PowerPoint. We then viewed a scene in a restaurant at the riverside, luncheon of the boating party, another open composition where the spectator feels a part of the group. The girl in the centre leads your eye to the group on the right. The composition is linked by the interchange of glances among the members of the group. Giving students handouts on key aspects of Renoir's life. Here is an example of the notes handed out to students. Starting with Moulin de la Galette in the first handout, and in the second handout, luncheon of the boating party. I decided to take 5 minutes for students to sketch the paintings discussed, as if they were in an exam situation. Half the class sketched Moulin de la Galette, while half sketched luncheon on the boating party. I requested that students annotate their sketches with labels as discussed on PowerPoint presentation, then asking one student from each group to stand up and describe their drawing referring to their annotation. This method worked well. It only took up to 7 minutes of class time, and I felt it was an effective way of getting students to understand the painting. The students presenting the image also encouraged some student participation and discussion. Then, for the last 10 minutes, in groups of 4, students completed a crossword on the information both in their own school art book and the notes I had handed out in class. This activity was an effective method of testing students' knowledge. Here are some examples of the students' work. The students enjoyed the activity, and it helped some of the students bond within the class.